Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fairfax Sports Report. My name is Greg Wyshynski of the Connection Newspapers, Jeff Graham of the Connection Newspapers, and of course, Joey Kamada of the Connection Newspapers. We are coming to you from, it looks like it might be someplace in Marshall High School tonight, but...
Bristol, Connecticut, 20
No,
years
indeed,
ago.
we are not. We are coming from a special, a hidden studio here in beautiful Maryfield, Virginia. Fairfax Sports Report, we have so much to talk about tonight. The Northern Region basketball finals finished up this week after many delays, and we have a boys champion named Wakefield and a girls champion named Oakton. That plus wrestling, plus track. We've got tons and tons and tons of stuff to talk about tonight on the Fairfax Sports Report. But first, boys, we have to talk about the folks that make this show possible. And of course, I'm talking about the underwriters. Underwriters like Ford Quality Care Service Center. For all of your Ford Quality Care Service Center needs, conveniently located in Fairfax, servicing all makes and models, 703-383-6299. CCI Screen Printing. For all of your screen printing needs,
There are
many needs. 703-978-0257. And let's get right to it. I want to first mention track and wrestling before we get to the basketball. Northern Region Track and Field this weekend. Lake Braddock, somehow, Smoke and Mirrors once again wins the girls' championship. Centerville and Hayfield were loaded with more star athletes in the sprints. Lake Braddock, again, uses its depth to win the regional title. And tribute again to the coach, Bob Digby, to field athlete Ashley Hayslip, and Kelsey Snowden, a distance runner. Great performances all around for Braddock, and they come away with the regional title. And Hayfield wins the boys' championship. They are very strong in the sprints. They have a couple of distance guys that really make a difference. And they'll be an interesting team to watch at States because usually the competition increases in a very, very big way when you get to States and you're dealing with the sprinters. And of course, wrestling boys, I want to mention congratulations to the only two champions from the Northern Region who went down to States and won state championships. Speaking, of course, about Sam O'Hare, who had a rough go of it last year. And actually, Brent Jones had a rough go of it last year, too. But Sam O'Hare from T.C. Williams wins a state championship, and Brent Jones wins a state championship at 215 for Robinson in probably one of the most dominating fashions we've seen. 3 pins and a major decision in the state tournament in Oscar Smith down in Chesapeake. So congratulations to them both.
Absolutely.
There you go. Basketball, boys. Tell me about the girls' game. You were privy to all of the details. You were basically, you had a cot in the back of the Patriots Center this week.
I was embedded at the Patriots Center along with some other guys, and Mike McGurk. I certainly want to take our hats off to him and the job that he did in putting the event on. He and Mark Martino from Lake Braddock as well. But the girls' championship game last night, Oakton won 41-40. And this was just a fantastic game, both games really. But Jasmine Thomas, who had missed 2 free throws that could have iced the region quarterfinal game against Hayfield a week earlier, and missed them. And she went down and she did block the shot. She did block the shot from Nana Phoebe Iegman, I think is how you say her name.
That's your dictionary.
But
so
they barely escaped there. On Tuesday night in the championship game, she sunk 2 free throws to give Oakton a 41-40 lead with 11 seconds left. And then Cassie Donnellan from Woodson went down, guarded by Samara Stephen Dowd, one of the top defenders in the Northern Region, 2-time Concord District All Defensive Player of the Year, and really kind of took Samara down court and got some space, created a shot just inside the free throw line. It kind of just rimmed out. It was a good look, and to be honest with you, when she released, I thought it was in.
Yeah.
I said, "Wow, Woodson just won this game," and he touched about as much rim as you can touch without it going in. And it came out, and it's just a heartbreaking loss for Woodson and Renee DeVarney. Woodson was seeking its first region championship since '94 and 5th overall, and Oakton won its 2nd region championship in 5 years, 2nd overall in school history. So congratulations,
Jeff. This Oakton team reminds me of the Chantilly team that came through a couple of years ago with when they had Elena Kashansky as sort of the centerpiece player. And a lot of people kind of, overlooked the fact that she had quite a supporting cast with her. It's sort of the same thing, I think, with Oakton this year. I mean, everybody is so focused on Jasmine Thomas, they forget about the rest of the team really contributing to the success of the team this season.
And I think the one thing that people, probably thought was not in Oakton's favor this year was their lack of, really height. They are a guard-oriented team. Jasmine is, the best player in the region for 2 straight years. But players like Whitney Parker, Andrea Yashinsky, players that are very complimentary to Thomas, but they don't really have that that presence inside where they had maybe 5 years ago with Amaka Gugwa and Megan Scott. But I know, I think in the playoffs, one of their forwards did step up.
Yeah, it's Lauren Burbach, and like you said, this is a much different team from that team in '01 with Megan Scott and Amaka Gugwa, kind of the same type of player, physical. Both kind of like a swingman type player, could also rebound, shoot from the outside. This is, like you said, more guard-oriented. But Lauren Burbach has done a phenomenal job coming off the bench for them. And you mentioned they haven't had a big post presence. Karen Nadeau at 5'9" is probably their best inside player. But Burbach has just been phenomenal off the bench for them throughout the entire postseason. Had a huge shot in that win over Hayfield. Had like 5 second and a half rebounds in the championship game the other night. So she's really come on late, and I think that's really given them a lift in the postseason.
And I think defensively, they held the Saxons in the semifinals to 23 points. Oakton's really been led by their defense, I think, in the playoffs more than their offense.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you talk about defense, as Coach Priester, I think, mentioned. I mean, in a critical point in the game, you have arguably the best defensive player in the region taking a stand against Woodson's offensive chance. So, it's a balanced team. It's more than just one player, and that's what makes them a real viable candidate, I think, to come home with maybe even a state title this season.
And the great teams, just like the Chicago Bulls in the '90s, they had a good supporting cast, but when it came crunch time, like Jasmine Thomas proved in hitting those 2 free throws, your best players step up and make plays. And that's what she did, and that's why she's the 2-time Region Player of the Year as a sophomore.
And for Woodson, a tremendous effort to get to this game, losing their point guard during the regular season, Ashley McCulloch. McCulloch really wasn't, I guess, too much of a factor in the playoffs, but Cassidy Donnellan stepped up. I guess she was a couple inches away from winning a championship for the Cats.
And Donnellan did a fantastic job stepping in and running the point when Ashley went down. AJ Lemaitre, the Liberty District's Player of the Year, had a phenomenal tournament, averaged a shade over 20 points a game throughout the tournament. Got herself in a little foul trouble, had a couple stupid fouls in the third quarter that really kind of, she sat down at the end of the third quarter with her fourth foul, really was kind of a non-factor from that point forward. And I know Coach DeVarney was kind of disappointed after the game because AJ had really taken the team and put them on her back and carried them through the postseason to get them into the championship game. But another thing DeVarney said after that game, the three-point shooting for Woodson just wasn't there last night. And this is a team that just, you have about 4 girls who have the green light from the time the opening tip until the end of the game to fire up three-pointers. And when they're hitting, like Coach DeVarney told us after the game, they'll blow some people out. I think they won 8 games this year, or 9 games by 20 or more points. And but when they're missing, she said it's going to be a close game.
And that's true. I had a chance to see them against Fairfax this year, and they were able to overcome a pretty tough Fairfax defense with that outside shooting, and they are built that way. I mean, and I think the injury to McCulloch sort of speaks to that. I mean, she is a very, very dangerous outside threat, and when you lose that sort of option or have that option diminished, it changes the team in a big way. That being said, I don't think any one of us would be surprised if Woodson made a run.
No.
I mean, they're a very, very good team, and it seems like we say this every year when we get to this point in the season. But if you look at the Final Four, you have Renee DeVarney with Woodson, Billy Gibson with West Springfield, Fred Priester with Oakton, and Cheryl Buffo with Langley. Those are 4 great coaches, and it just seems like every year there's no fluke. It's either the teams that are really well coached that get there. There's never a team that just, on the girls' side at least, gets there with talent. It's always solid coaching. You start with that, and then you fill in the blanks after that, and that's how you win in the region.
And you have Pat Deegan, Westfield didn't even make it to the Final Four. Another fantastic coach. Derek Fisher over at Lake Braddock didn't even get past the first round. Noel Klippenstein. There's some great coaches on the girls' side of the region.
I think Langley was the big surprise team, knocking off number 1 Edison out of the National District to get to the semifinal round. So I mean, that was
kind of a Cinderella. The only non-number 1 seed on the boys or girls' side to make it to the Patriot Center.
And you make an interesting point about that. If you look at the path of these teams through the region, you had Langley beating Lake Braddock, and then you had Oakton beating Hayfield. You had Woodson beating both Robinson and West Springfield. So the question is, there's 3 ways you can look at it. Either the Patriot District teams beat each other up all season and went into this thing a little bit more battle-weary than the other teams did, or the Patriot District was a little overrated, or the Liberty District was a little underrated. A, B, or C?
Well, the Liberty District, in my opinion, didn't have as good a showing as they really could have. I thought all year Marshall could have been the best team in that
If you
district.
would have told me 2 Liberty teams would have made the
I thought it
semis, I
would have
would have
been
said Marshall would have been the second. And Langley started off hot and then
Right.
faded down the stretch.
When those region brackets came out, I said, hey, there's a good potential. And now this is also knowing that Dorena Campbell for Edison was a little bit banged up and wasn't at 100%. I said, there's a good possibility we could have 3 Liberty District teams in the Patriot Center in the semifinals.
So you think they were a little underrated, probably the Liberty District this year? I mean, all the talk
Well,
all
they
season
still
was about
got
the
2
Patriot District.
teams to the semifinals.
Right.
More than any other district. So that's
If you would have
still-
said Edison wouldn't have made it to the semifinals, I would have either said one of the Patriot District powerhouses or
Right.
one of the Liberty District teams.
If anything, Edison was overrated going into that game. This is a team that had won 11 of their 12 district games by 30 or more points. Who would they beat?
right.
They're undefeated, but they really hadn't beaten anybody.
And was undefeated. I would never have picked Langley to beat Edison.
And, well, you make a very good segue there, Captain Segue, which is you had Edison, a team that went undefeated, rolled through their district, got to the regional tournament, lost in the quarterfinals. And that was the knock, as I transition, on Wakefield every year, especially last year. They roll through the district, they get to the tournament, they get beat early, they don't make an impression. And then, of course, this year, they roll on through undefeated. Unbelievable season for that team. Did you honestly think that they were going to beat Hayfield in the final? I mean, getting there, I think you could make the argument they were a better team than Westfield. They were more athletic. They were so strong inside that they had a pretty good competitive advantage. Did you think they were going to beat Hayfield?
Well, being that Hayfield was the defending champs, you'd have to give them the edge. But based on the semifinal performance by Wakefield, they handled Westfield, who was a real strong team throughout the whole year. They went up to Chicago. Went to New York, played a nationally ranked team, really close. Could have won that game against Christ the King, but Wakefield beats them by 15 points in the semis. Whereas Hayfield had a real close game against Woodson that could have really gone either way.
Yeah, and, Coach Bentley, and first off, hats off to Coach Bentley because I know he was giving me some
All right,
trouble.
let's talk about that for a second. Now, you had a little conversation with Coach Bentley.
Oh,
After the game, didn't you?
between Coach Flugrath over at Woodson and him, man, I took my beatings and kind of ate some crow this
Because
year for a comment I made.
You
about
to remind the
mid-season.
viewers, were saying at one point that you didn't think either Wakefield or Woodson would go undefeated this year.
Well, Woodson didn't.
Well, it's true. So you're,
But Woodson had a heck of a run. Wakefield, obviously hats off. Just a fabulous run through the postseason. And Bentley even said after the game, he said, nobody expected us to coming from the national district, but we feel we're battle tested, and they are. They've played Edison twice, beaten them both times. They played Hayfield twice, beaten them both times. They beat a couple of very good teams in their holiday tournament. Coach Bentley, he said, he called 125 schools from the state, from the district, from Maryland, to get anybody that wanted to come in. He's taken any and all takers into this holiday tournament over there at Wakefield, and they won that tournament. They beat them all. And so they are extremely battle-tested, contrary to popular belief, being a national district team going into this state tournament next week.
The national district, that's a stigma. If you're from the national district, you're not going to win.
and Bentley is the first guy to admit it. You talked to him before the season. It's all about trying to shake that stereotype of being a national district team and not being able to win the big game. Now, we've all seen super talented teams come out of the national district, make the regional tournament, and not win. I think the two differences in this Wakefield team were you were talking about a coach who kept that team focused, who captained that ship to the point where those guys knew it didn't matter what you did in the regular season, the district tournament, or the first round of regionals. You had to get to the Patriot Center if people were going to give you respect. So once you got there, then all of a sudden the ball rolls, you win the region. The other thing, and I didn't think I'd be saying this at the beginning of the season, but Kenny James, point guard on that team.
Fastest thing on 2 feet.
Fastest thing on 2 feet, but also a guy who is a difference maker out there. He really was a guy who was able to control games, really captain that offense a little bit, and also, shoot the ball a little bit too. And I think that he was sort of the X factor, the guy who was sort of going to make or break the season. And you got to give him all the credit in the world for being the guy who was able to kind of guide that offense along with all that talent on the floor at all times with him,
Kind of rewinding a little bit, Hayfield got to the championship game by beating Woodson. Now they slipped by Woodson. Woodson had 2 opportunities on a Tim Colress three-pointer with about 7 or 8 seconds. No, I guess it was about 4 seconds left. And then Nick Olivero with kind of an off-balance, 22, 23-foot shot at the buzzer to win that game. And I mentioned that Woodson did not go undefeated, but let's talk a little bit about the job that Pflugrath and the Cavaliers, 27-1, and Rhett Bowling in that game against Hayfield. And I know the Wakefield coaches were watching. I think he exposed them a little bit. He got them. He came in and he was just all over the place. Got Heyman and Freeman in foul trouble, and that really hampered them down the stretch. 26 points, like 11 or 12 rebounds. And I think Wakefield's coaches may have seen that and said, hey, we can take advantage of Hayfield on the front line, even though Mike Freeman's 6'8", Heyman's 6'5", 6'6", and as active as you're going to find. And we even saw it on the last shot of the game last night. Nate Idlet takes the Kenny James miss, gets the rebound over Antonio Heyman, and then he goes up and under and around Mike Freeman. This is a 6'2" guy getting a rebound over 6'5" and going around a 6'8" guy as the buzzer. By the way, there's .3 on the clock when he released that. So any Hayfield, any doubters, because we all know back Lake Braddock, 2003 district championship.
Depending on who you talk about, that was either really legitimate or really not. And I tend to err on the side of it was a legitimate gripe. But
we saw the replay.
Ancient history.
I think
the light hadn't gone off.
If you look back to the state tournament last year, when Hayfield lost to Hilton in the first round, was upset. Hilton had a real big kid in the middle who was able to disrupt things.
Right.
Same case here. I think Wakefield had the big guys up front that could.
Wakefield doesn't have anyone 7'2" like Hilton.
Right.
I'm sure Natalie wouldn't mind.
They don't have anybody who looks like the alien from Close Encounters coming out of the spaceship. But they, the thing that they had that when you told me about this, it surprised me because I really thought all season long that Wakefield went about 7 deep. But they go deeper than that, and not only that, but the ability of them to shuffle guys in and out of the post. This is a team that basically rode Alex Ermer all season as their main offensive option. Championship game, he comes with 4 points, and yet they win the game. That is astounding. Is there another team in the region that can see their best player score 4 points when he's averaging probably what you figure?
He's averaging, I think, 16.
About 16 a game. That's incredible to me that they were able to pull that off.
Well, that's Coach Bentley said after the game, Ermer's the man on this team. There's no question. He's our stud. But we have other guys on this team that know how to step up, and guys like Nate Idlet, guys like. I can't even. I'm losing my.
Well, you got Crawley.
Well, Crawley, Jeff Crawley,
yeah.
And you've got the starts with an A. Anderson, no.
Allen. Anthony Allen.
Anthony Allen. There you go. I'm sorry, Anthony. Anthony Allen had a big game last night.
I'm gonna quiz you.
And then of course you got Kenny James, who he averaged under 10 a game this year, but he was the National District's Player of the Year. That just shows what kind of impact he can have without scoring.
Right.
But also, I think you look at Idlet. You mentioned him hitting the winning shot. When he transferred in, he was a military kid, transferred in from school in Germany, and you just got a sense at the beginning of the season that throwing this kid into a mix where you knew they were going to be great in the post, you knew they had pretty good guard play, that an athletic, defensive player with an incredible vertical game was going to be such an amazing addition to this team and really was going to be a difference maker. And you saw it in the final. That he was the difference maker at the end of that game.
And I think one player who really didn't show up in this game, either this game or the other games in the postseason, Jason Evans for Hayfield. Yeah. I know you were looking at his stats, kind of a missing.
Yeah, I tell you, Jason Evans' guy was 12 points per game guy this year, and Deuce as they call him over there at Hayfield, 14 points in the 4 region games, and really just kind of struggled. To get himself open, free himself on some shots. He was 2 for 5 in the championship game with 5 points. So obviously, Coach Thompson's going to want to get him on track in the States.
And we'll touch on the all-tournament team in a second. One guy who's sort of the flip side of Deuce in the regionals was Britt Kelly for Hayfield. You can't give this kid enough credit. First of all, he's a kid who came to Hayfield and sort of had to put his offensive game in check. Right. That wasn't his role. His role wasn't to come in and score 24 points a game. His role was to be sort of more of a defensive player in that lineup. And in the quarterfinal game against Herndon, he played an incredibly good defensive game against Scotty Reynolds, continued to play well, but also sort of feeding off the intensity of his defensive game, was able to put up a bunch of points in this tournament too. And I was blown away by it. It was night and day sometimes watching Kelly in this tournament versus Kelly in the regular season. And he deserves all the credit in the world. He stepped up his game big time.
He had a game-high 17 last night. Tuesday night rather, in the championship game, 10 in the third quarter. And really, the third quarter of that championship game, Wakefield went up 38-30 and was really rolling. And I thought, okay, Wakefield's got command of this game, it's over. But he really kind of single-handedly kept them in that game. They cut it to 4 before the fourth quarter started, and they were able to Freeman and Heyman had big fourth quarters, were able to to tie the game up. And as we know, Idle hit the winning shot at the end. But like you said, Britt Kelly had a fantastic game, fantastic tournament.
Now Kelly, I believe, was an all-tournament team addition. Who else made that all-tournament team, Mr. Kamad?
Crawley, as we mentioned before, Crawley came off the bench. And he made it. Rhett Bowling, really based on his effort in the semifinals. He was the only guy not in the final to make the all-tournament team. Idlet was on it. Irmer, despite the 4 points in the final, was on it. And Antonio Heyman, Mike Freeman, both on it. And Kenny James, he had 11 assists in the semifinal win. He had 7 assists last night. God, I keep saying it's last night. We're taping this show on Wednesday night. Had 7 assists in the championship game. Kenny James was the MVP of the Northern Region tournament. So this is, a lot of people saw, Kenny James, Northern District, National District Player of the Year, and kind of.
And you look at his stats, and not quite, not.
What about
too
Alex
impressive.
Irmer? Right. But he proved himself obviously in this.
He
tournament.
certainly did, and again, all the credit in the world to Wakefield. I think they opened up a lot of eyes. They proved a lot of people wrong. And you got to wonder whether there's a sense, and I say this completely from my own opinion. You got to wonder if there's a sense of accomplishment right now, and whether or not there is momentum to carry to states, or do you think there is?
I think the one thing that you hear from those Wakefield fans is that this isn't the only team to go undefeated and win the region. There was a team in 1969, I believe it was, that went undefeated to the state championship game and lost. So they want to be the first team in school history to go undefeated to the state championship game and win. And they've won a state championship back in, I think,
and I think that just tells you how competitive the state tournament has been. And this year, every team in the state tournament, boys and girls side, has 20 wins. 4 teams on each side have 25 wins.
Right.
So nobody got here, by falling off the back of a peach truck.
Peach truck, very good. Or a tree.
Tree.
What have you. Before we get to the state tournament, I just want to mention, you mentioned them. Props to the Wakefield fans. Those kids and the alumni and the community came out in droves this season to see that team, and they represented at the Patriot Center in a big, big way.
Even though you were making fun of me on the broadcast of the game for being a cheerleader, I got caught up in it. It was just a great showing. Wakefield probably brought, I believe it was just a shade under 5,000 people last night. They probably had about 2,000, 2,500 on their own. And Hayfield showed up and brought a good following as well to that game.
More impressive. So, state tournament, boys. Let's start off with the girls' side. What do you think about the first-round matchups for Oakton and Woodson, and who possibly could make it to the finals at the Siegel Center in Richmond?
I mean, I think you have a lot of great, like I said before, you have a lot of great teams matching up in the first round. Defending state champion Forest Park is matching up with Hampton. Oakton is facing a Manchester team that beat the Central Region champion 2 weeks ago. They're led by Lindsay Biggs, who was their leading scorer, and Melanie Oliver. So Oakton's got a tough match right off the bat, Joey.
Well, Oakton does. I think Woodson really has the tougher match. Monacan at 27-1 coming into the tournament. They handed Manchester all 4 of their losses. So, obviously this is clearly the best team out of the Central Region. So Woodson's definitely going to have their hands full in that game. Oakton, like you mentioned, they're going to have a tough first-round matchup, but, they get past that second round. They've got Forest Park. This is a Forest Park team that lost their first 3 games of the year. They've since won 24 straight games, defending state champions. They knocked Madison out in the state quarterfinals last year en route to that state title.
And as our viewers at home can see, you got your opening round games on Saturday, then we go to action on Wednesday, and then the finals next Saturday, the 12th. So, Mark, those calendars.
Not a lot of time. As Charlie Thompson said after the championship game on Tuesday, we have 2 days to prepare for this championship.
This is a sprint, my
for
friends.
this state tournament. But the Eastern region got their games in on Saturday, so they have an entire week to prepare.
Right.
So defending, as if defending champion Woodside on the boys' side needed any more help. They get a whole week to prepare.
Sure. And speaking of that, on the boys' side, Hayfield with the loss in the regional final matches up with LC Bird down in Mechanicsville this Saturday. They're in the same bracket as Woodside. Should they beat LC Bird, then that's a semifinal matchup against the defending state champs. And then you got Wakefield and Henrico, the Battle of the Warriors.
There you go. Well, I know Charlie Thompson said after the championship game, he was blatant. He said we have a matchup problem if we face Bird.
Right.
Because Tyrese Rice, he scored 37 points in that region championship game. He's 27 points a game. A lot of people think he's the top guard in the state this year. And
it's a Bird team that scored over 100 points 4 times this year.
This is an explosive team. And Kenny James really exposed Hayfield's guards. He was beating Ray Davis consistently off the dribble, and Tyrese Rice is an extremely quick guard in his own right. So they're going to have problems. It'll be interesting to see what kind of defense Charlie draws up for them.
And you can't discount the importance of Ray Davis to that team. I mean, his nickname when they do the little introductions to Hayfield is the General. It's like Sherman Douglas, Syracuse University. And
looks a little bit like him too.
Absolutely. And he I think if he plays his game, and his game isn't just defensive. I mean, he is also.
It may have to be just defensive.
But he is.
Game.
Well, it can't be because he is one of their consistent outside threats, and he has hit some incredibly big three-pointers at opportune times this season. And he cannot just be a defensive guy. I mean, obviously defensively he's got his responsibilities, but he also has to put some points on the board for that team too.
Hayfield's going to have to score out. I'm thinking 80 points and play a good defensive game and win this one.
I think if they score 175 points, they win the game. That's my bold prediction.
What
about Wakefield, boys? Do you think Wakefield's got a shot at making the finals on the boys' side?
Absolutely. This is obviously they're undefeated. They've got people are looking at them and they're going to see that undefeated record and that's got to give them a couple points right there, right off the bat. Someone gets a little bit intimidated when seeing an undefeated team, setting up a possible semifinal matchup between undefeated teams if Potomac gets past Lansdowne, which isn't a given. This is a very good Lansdowne team as well.
Should be awesome.
And kind of looking over what we have in that bracket. Potomac at 26-0, Lansdowne 23-4. I believe 2 of those losses were to Woodside, defending state champ. You got undefeated Wakefield. Henrico's at 22-5. LC Birds at 28-1.
There you go.
Hayfield 22-6. Woodside defending champ at 26-2, and Garfield at 21-5. So, like you mentioned, everybody in states this year.
I wouldn't be surprised to see any of these teams move on to the next round.
I wouldn't be surprised if we have to wrap up. Let's thank the underwriters, ladies and gentlemen, for Quality Care Service. Oh, we want to mention first, we've got high school basketball coming up this weekend. Virginia State AAA basketball girls quarterfinals, Oakton versus Manchester, Sunday at 6 on Cox 35 repeats. More basketball, more everything next week on the Fairfax Sports Report. www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com, of course, is our website. I want to thank Ford Quality Care Ford Service Center for all your makes and models, 703-383-6299, and CCI Screen Printing. All of your screen printing needs, 703-978-0257. That's pretty quick, wasn't it?
That was excellent.
All right, boys. Well, great basketball action this week. Even better basketball action this weekend. It's going to be a blast. If you had to pick one team out of the 4 that are live from the region to make the finals, who would it be?
I'm going to go with Wakefield because I'm not underrating Coach Bentley's team anymore.
There you go. I want to thank everybody for watching. Please join us next week for more action. The Fairfax Sports Report. Thanks, everybody.